Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CXNow. My name is Kev McGackie. I'm Head of Digital Solutions here at Sabio. I'm going to take you through a demo of Google DialogFlow and how we're using the technology here to advance the agent workspace for our clients. Now, if you attended the conversation this morning led by Stu, this follows on from some of the innovations that the guys spoke about. This week's CXNow theme is about the digitisation of the customer service. And artificial intelligence is a core technology in this trend. And generally, when we talk about AI, we imagine virtual assistants or chatbots online, or perhaps a voice bot in the IVR taking the customer through a pre-prescribed journey. And AI in part is this. And these are real-world examples of how AI is being deployed and value is being found by organisations today. And in the vast majority of cases, we see that AI is deployed focused on presenting to the customer, so being customer facing. And as a result of this, what we see are simpler contact types, such as the narrow questions being answered, for example, store opening times, or simple transactions, such as making a payment, again, being successfully handled by the AI. And whilst this is great from both a business and a customer perspective, the knock-on effect is that our agents remain responsible for those complex and challenging contacts. And that's where we're seeing a growth in agent fatigue as the role becomes more and more demanding on them. Now, to support this though, we've turned to that same Google DialogFlow AI being used to manage our customers' conversations and have turned it inwards, creating Sabio's Agent Assist. Now, to help talk through the demo today, I'm joined by Damien. Afternoon, Damien. Do you want to give an introduction?
Hi there, Kevin. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Damien Kelly. I head up product management at Sabio, and that includes the products that we build in-house and what we've acquired over time. I've spent most of my recent career in artificial intelligence and automation of customer service. I was a founder of a company called SpeechStorm, and I worked for a time as a VP product at Genesis too. My focus at Sabio is very much on AI and automation, particularly on the tools and integrations that complement the vendor solutions that we're bringing to market, including DialogFlow. And I think the technology that we have at our disposal today with things like DialogFlow, it's among the most exciting that I've ever seen. And it's going to be great fun to share some of that with you this afternoon.
Perfect. Thanks, Damien. So before we get started, this is a live session, and so we have the Q&A feature available as part of today's demo. If you have any questions or you want to ask as we go through, or anything you've got on this topic, please just drop them into the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to try and answer them as we progress our way through this. Okay, so Damien, to get started, it'd be good if you could give us an overview of what Google DialogFlow is and why we're seeing it as such a hot topic at the moment.
Sure. So DialogFlow is a Google Cloud service, and what I mean by that is that you can access it directly over the web. There's nothing to download. There's nothing to install. You can get started with it straight away. And what it does is it brings together Google's speech to text, text to speech, and natural language capabilities. But why DialogFlow is so hot and why we're seeing such a big interest in it is because it's both very, very powerful in bringing that AI capability to bear, but it's also very easy to use. And we'll talk today about two particular use cases around virtual agent, which is when we use the bot, as Kevin described earlier, to kind of take the place of a human interaction with the customer. So usually in place of a traditional IVR or chatbot. And then the second use case around Agent Assist, which is where we use that same AI capability to assist an advisor or a customer service representative in serving the customer better. And that's really what we're going to look more closely about. Kevin, do you want to kind of do a quick tour of DialogFlow as a tool itself?
Yep, sure. So you hopefully get to see the screen. So this is DialogFlow Essentials or DialogFlow ES. And what we're showing here is an example of an insurance-based AI that we have built. So there's kind of three key components within DialogFlow. Now, a number of features, but we'll cover off just three of them, which will help articulate how we are using DialogFlow today. So the first, in its simplest terms, is fulfillment. So fulfillment is where we can provide instructions to the AI to go and perform an action. And this fulfillment allows us to define where it should go to perform that action. So we're just giving it a reference or a source to go and find out where it should go next. A second element to this is entities. Entities are, in this example, if you think about how you might describe a motorcycle or a bike, the customer may use different terminology to talk about the same topic. This is about helping the AI to understand that these mean the same thing. That's all it is. So whether the person says car or vehicle, that means the same thing in the sentence. And then the key part of it is intents. So intents are really looking for what are the phrases or utterances that the customer might provide, working them up into what that means they're trying to achieve with their call or their contact, and then defining what it is we want to do next with it. Now, as I said, this is just a very brief example of what an insurance model may look like. If I just pick one of these out, if we look at change vehicle mileage. Okay, so this is the intent name as a construct of how we have defined it. So we have chosen that the intent that the customer wants to do is to make a change and that they want to change the mileage of their vehicle. So we have decided that that's the intent. To then match to that intent, what we're looking for the customer to say is something along the lines of, I want to amend my mileage or update my mileage, etc. So these are the phrases, if the customer says, will match against this intent. Now we use Google's natural language understanding here to work out and to match many iterations or variations of that same types of phrases to then work against this intent. So we aren't trying to here list every single possible way that somebody might say this. And then, as I said about fulfillment, when we match to an intent, we have the ability to then define what we want to do next with it, which we'll cover off just shortly. And then most importantly, we have the ability to say something back to the customer when it matches. So if we think about this in the general world of a virtual assistant on the website, for example, the customer has said, I need to update the mileage of my car. And we can see here that the response the chatbot will provide to that customer is to make the change, go use the online portal. So this is how we build up what is a intent and response-based model that allows us to find out what the customer has a pain point about or a question about and give them a response that they can go and do something with, and provide the AI with some instructions that allow it to understand what to do next. Should it pass the conversation to an agent? Should it go and pass information to another system, for example?
Sorry, Kevin.
No, sorry, Damien. I was just going to quickly show. So in DialogFlow, we also have the ability to train the VA, obviously see what questions are being asked and allow the AI to upskill itself, so interpret new things. So we have inside the DialogFlow window a little test bot that sits at the right-hand side here. And we have the ability just to ask a question. If I was to ask, change how many miles I drive, for example, what we can see is what the user asked and what response was given to the user. Now, this default fallback intent, just to briefly explain, means that the AI couldn't find anything. It doesn't know what to do with that type of query. And that's where the optimization and the administration and management of AI allows you to then work out actually how do we assist it, how do we teach it what to do with that type of query. If I click back out, we can see here that we have one which is called change vehicle mileage. It does understand that this is an intent, but it doesn't yet understand if the person says change how many miles I drive, that is the same thing. So we can very quickly change how many miles, add that phrase in. I'm going to click save, which is going to train the AI. And then if we ask this in a slightly different way, so we've just trained it on change how many miles I drive. If I ask it in a slightly different way, so amend the number of miles that I drive, we can see here that it's still matched to that same intent and provided the user response. So that's an example where we say we don't have to add every single variation. We're allowing the AI to interpret that those mean the same thing.
Great. So we can create those intents, create those intended responses, and start to train the agent to understand. But what we want to do to make this really useful is connect it up to a web chat conversation or to a voice conversation, so we can ultimately have the agent at the backup. Can you show us how to do that, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. So we have hooked up this DialogFlow agent with Twilio Flex. So using Sabio's airline product, we have an integration that creates the integration between the two platforms. So the idea here is that we reduce the effort of any integration that our clients may need to make and allows them to focus on just building out their AI and just getting on with the process. So in airline here, there's a number of things that you can configure and you can define as part of it. The DialogFlow agents is where we configure what that agent should be. Text-to-speech profiles, if it's something we want spoken, we can define exactly what that voice is, for example. And we can see here on an incoming web chat, just to give you a very brief view, we have set this up to use CCAI. So we're going to be using those enhanced features, that agent assist capabilities. We've defined how we want it to handle it, and we've said that this is the incoming route. So if it comes from this web chat channel, it's what we want to do. Similarly, we could add in there telephone numbers if that was to be an SMS conversation, for example. We can define them as all the different entry points. This just tells the system what to do when somebody starts a conversation, which DialogFlow agent we want it to interact with, because we may have multiple of them. And so I can give an example of this. If we just try and say hello, I should be able to say, I need to update my mileage. And you can see here we've received a new incoming chat, and this is the same conversation. So we've passed it through to the agent. The agent can see the history, and we can see here that it says to update mileage. So that was the intent that the customer had. And we can see in the intents, when we click into them, you're able to then see that actually that was the action that we had defined for it to take. So when I talked about briefly cast over these actions and the fulfillment mechanism, but really what's happening here is we are telling the AI, when you match to this update my mileage, I want you to tell the customer, okay, I'm going to connect you with an advisor, and I want you to take an action, and I want you to escalate that out to the agent. So that's exactly what's happened when we go into Flex. That's the responses that the customer saw, and now it's landed with an agent.
Super. All pretty straightforward so far, and probably things that people are familiar with having seen other bots, either chatbots or voice bots, and pass that through to an agent. And we probably should say other agent desktop in the tradition. We're using Flex here because it's quite easy to show. The next thing I think we want to look at, Kevin, is how, and the really cool side of how DialogFlow actually supports the agent with doing their job. So perhaps we'll go to that next.
Yeah, for sure. So let me just start a new conversation here. Okay, so the customer says, hi, I need a copy. Okay, so we have a new interaction type, a new reason that the customer's trying to come through. Oh. Well, this is going well. You can go and work out why it's not come through. Let's have a quick look.
That's the problem with all this home working, Kevin, is children, animals, and demos, right?
I want a copy. Let's try again. Oh, let's just try refresh and see if it comes back. Okay, let's see if we can
There you go.
trigger off let's see if we can trigger off the next part. Okay, so the conversation has connected. Let's just see if we can get this to still load. We're just trying to mimic here the conversation that, this is the agent's desktop, and this is the UI in which the customer is having a web chat conversation in this scenario. So if we just try and key in our account number, so what you're starting to see here is this right-hand panel padding out. So this is the dynamic context panel that you spoke about. Now, what's happened here is that the AI has detected that the customer has provided their account number based on some criteria that we've predefined for it. We have told the AI to go and query a CRM, for example, to then retrieve what is the valuable information that the agent needs to see just now. And this is about putting the most relevant, most important information at the agent's fingertips. So actually, you're not having to chop and change between screens. It's very prominent, very visible in your face in real time, so when you need it. So, the criteria or the content that we display in these panels is entirely customizable, obviously. It's about the mechanism of using DialogFlow and the AI to interpret the contact reasons to make sure we surface them up. So we can see here the intent was speak to agent, that's a premium customer, what the recent transactions have been, etc. And that the customer needs to pass ID and V. These are key elements that the agent needs to know at the very start of that conversation.
Cool. So then after that, what we really want to do is help this agent find the relevant information, the knowledge, the responses that's going to help them serve, right? Because that's where the power of using AI in real time can really be brought to bear.
It is. So, the customer has got that they've recently changed their direct debit, for example. And if I go back in, what we can look at then is the customer saying, they have a follow-up question that comes off the back of this. So we should be able to just check one. So I want to know what happens if I have a payment. Okay, so I want to know what happens if I have if I've got a payment due before my direct debit updates. So what we're now providing with the customer is the second element of the agent assist, so the suggested responses. And so the DialogFlow has detected that that query or that intent of the customer, by listening into the conversation as it's progressing, can see that that's the query. They need to understand, well, if my direct debit changes, got a payment due to come out, what's going to happen? Is it going to go through or not? And so the AI has suggested to the agent that this is the response they should provide. So we'll show you the DialogFlow side in a second, but it has a response that it's been told to provide back to the agent. The agent can check it, decide whether actually that was a match, that is what the customer's intent was, or actually it wasn't, and they can click back out. To make their life as simple as possible, again, this is all about putting the information at their fingertips, making it as streamlined as we can. You can quite simply just click send, and the customer immediately receives that message as well. So it saves the agent even having to key it in.
So this is really like reusing the same knowledge that you might use in the virtual agent scenario and surfacing that in Agent Assist too. So you get really two for the price of one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in DialogFlow, these are all constructed based on the different intents that we've set out. So the one we asked there is about making a payment before the update has been applied. We can click in. This is what it matched to. So obviously it has training phrases exactly the same way your intents or conversations would. And we've told it to use Agent Assist. So we're telling it to provide this answer to the agent to assist them. And here's the text that we want to provide. So your knowledge management, and we're doing this in this way. So we're doing this by surfacing knowledge through intents. But as you said, Damien, we could absolutely surface a knowledge base, for example. Now, DialogFlow gives us the ability to add in that knowledge base into Dialogflow itself, and it will query the existing question and answer structure that you would already have inside that knowledge base. Or alternatively, in the context panel, you could surface knowledge in that space as well. It's all about making sure the information is brought to the agent's desktop. It's about bringing it to the forefront, so actually I don't have to go and search my knowledge management system. AI's given me the answer. It's already helped me get to what I was trying to find.
Super. We've got a question here about analytics on what we're seeing, because obviously there's going to be a high rate of transactions coming through here. How do we actually get to see what's happening in aggregate? How do we understand where to focus our attention, or how much benefit the platform is delivering?
Yeah, definitely. So as part of Airline, we have a reporting suite available to us, and it's ultimately that all of the data is available to you, and you can cut and chop and change this data in any way you want. And as part of our project, we help our customers to define what those dashboards or reports should look like that they're trying to track. What are the KPIs that they want to see, what's important to them. And this is just, a very standard out the box one, which is merely tracking what is the phrase that the customer has said and what intent did that match against. And this, we talk about AI, and it goes back to some of the points that were made in the session this morning as part of Stu's session. And it's that AI it needs to be monitored, administered, managed. This is really a virtual agent that you're having to make sure you're constantly improving, and you have to be monitoring it in the same way you would any other contact center agent. And we can see here, this is the examples of what we were just talking about. So the messages I was sending in that weren't providing the response they should. But these are the utterances we gave, and we can see what it matched to. So we can now do some analysis to work out why that happened and go back and train our AI. So next time it works first time.
Very good. A question about how to get started. I mean, we said at the top of this this is pretty easy to use. What do you do to get started with Dialogflow, to get started with doing these types of integrations?
Yeah, sure. So obviously Airline creates the integration between Dialogflow and the desktop space that we might want to try and use. But that alone and just Dialog in its own right, it's very simple to create a new agent. As soon as you create yourself a Google account, you start with a blank piece of paper, but to build intents is the same as we saw clicking into them. It's very easy to define them, add training phrases, etc., and start to build out what that looks like. Now, what we are showing here and how we are presenting this is obviously a text-based format. So we're ultimately set this up from a web chat perspective, or even SMS. You can do it in these different contact channels. But yeah, setting up a Dialogflow agent takes really little effort. It's about then building up your AI, ensuring you're giving it and feeding it with the right questions and information it needs in order to be able to answer the queries as they come in.
Yeah, I know what we've done with a number of clients to date already has just been to do a very focused, maybe 4, 6, or 8 week exercise to really understand those intents, just by capturing those first off, using the analytics then to understand where are the popular ones, and really using that to drive the business case of understanding what we might want to automate, what we might want to deflect, which ones we might prefer to have an agent handle. So I know that that's something that we've done and has proved very, very successful, which I think, and you mentioned some of the other sessions, Kevin, that there's an opportunity to hear directly from some of those customers like Marks and Spencer, like HomeServe, and how they've approached this. Final question, just on those channels. So available for chat, available for messaging, available for voice. With all of this being very dynamic, people might be wondering what the experience is like with those voices. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So there is a raft of voices that are available as text to speech. The profiles have got ever better over time. They now have very realistic And when we think about the IVR voices that are applied across many organizations today, whilst they are generally done by a voice artist, they all have that very same sounding type voice. An IVR tone is fairly consistent across many. And actually, the text-to-speech profiles allow you to achieve that. They do absolutely fit into that. And, the text-to-speech nature, you talk about that upfront exercise. So we do an intent capture analysis process, which draws out those real customer utterances into intents. And you're absolutely right. The purpose of that activity is to then define what does the roadmap look like for automation. But as part of that text-to-speech ability and not relying on voice artists, we find that actually we can make changes and effect, benefits far, far quicker because there isn't any time delay in there, for example. It's a very iterative, fast-paced ability that it gives us.
Yeah, I have to say it's one of the things that I find most exciting about this is that we're getting to the point with these technologies where we can have and think about real kind of conversational engagement with customers as opposed to a very stunted or prescriptive type interaction. Super. We've a couple of minutes left. Just to kind of recap on what we've seen. So we've seen real intent capture. So directing either calls or chats to the right agent based on that natural language intent. How easy it is to configure and train and build on those. Some examples of how to help the agent to be more efficient, either surfacing data from downstream systems, surfacing knowledge from a repository, or actually prompting them with suggestions, which I guess in a voice scenario, that gives them a prompt to read from. In a chat scenario, even save them some of the typing. Automatically capturing that intent and the history of the conversation, and then also to get that whole piece just up and running quickly with the powerful analytics, so you can kind of start to experiment. I think in 30 minutes, a really quick run through, and I think maybe an encouragement for anybody out there to get started with this. Kevin, anything you want to just add before we go?
Yeah, no, hopefully it's been informative, at least given some insights as to what is possible with this AI. And as I said at the start, a large part of AI deployments today have all been customer facing. This is about turning it inwards and actually using what is a really powerful capability to drive performance internally as well, and to actually benefit those agents that are having a harder time of it since the introduction. And I think just to call out, as you said, so the next session we have is at 3:00 with Phil and Amir from HomeServe, and they've started out on this same AI and automation journey with that really small initial use case about just understanding why people contact, etc. And Google DialogFlow is the solution that we implemented to help them to achieve that. So I absolutely would recommend, if people hadn't planned to, that you'd absolutely join that session. It's really, really valuable, and the guys have got so many good stories to talk about. So other than that, thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for attending. Hopefully you're getting the most out of CXNow, and we'll speak to you again shortly.
Thanks for joining.